Today on The Nose, our weekly cultural roundtable, Decision to Leave is a romantic cop thriller which, draws upon at least 3 different Hitchcock sources, plus movies like Sea of Love and Basic Instinct and the 2 Insomnia movies. But that does not mean that it isn't its own very original thing, and certainly beautiful to look at. So we're going to talk about that, and as far as the rest of the show goes, we're still arguing about whether to talk about the death of a famous cracker, the kind you eat, why we're attracted to cop fiction and film and television, something about the Golden Globes, I don't know. We're arguing about what we want to argue about, and that's a good argument in and of itself. Hello, welcome to The Nose. So, first of all, this happens occasionally where, let me just sort of back up and also say, and I'm going to break the Severn Sant rule. Severn Sant, who's one of our show's greatest fans and most insightful critics, feels that I should never talk about the emails we send and stuff like that to get ready for The Nose, but I do anyway. So what we do is, like, for days, we're sending emails back and forth and, like, what are the topics going to be? I mean, today we knew right away that the movie Decision to Leave, which I've had a lot of trouble with. For about 3 months, I called that movie Ticket to Ride. But it's actually Decision to Leave, which is a Korean romantic thriller in very much the vein of Hitchcock. We knew that was going to be one of our topics. And then we had to try to figure out what the other topics are. And it's not like we didn't have any ideas. We had a lot of ideas. But sometimes it's like, people don't really just coalesce behind any particular set of ideas. So that's what's happened today. And I mean, 3 of my absolute favorite panelists are on, so I'm quite confident that we'll have a very interesting conversation about something. James Hanley is with us, co-founder of Cine Studio at Trinity College. Helder Mira is a multimedia producer at Trinity College and co-host of the So Pretentious podcast with Vivian Nabetta. Carolyn Paine is an actress, comedian, and dancer. And I'm laughing because she described how she's apparently dressed in full Jennifer Coolidge today while we're doing this show. She's gone full Coolidge to get ready for the show. And I can't really get that picture out of my head right now. She's founder, director, and choreographer of Kinetic Dance. So they're all with us. And so I want to begin not with the Golden Globes, because frankly, I didn't watch the Golden Globes. But the Golden Globes happened this year after not having happened last year. And one of the charms of the Golden Globes is that they're so discredited. And it's, kind of a bunch of rich, drunk celebrities. And that nobody has to be nice about the whole thing. And Gerard Carmichael, who was hosting, just started out on the most perfect note of just tearing the whole organization to shreds and saying, I loved this in particular, that he refused to go to the meeting he was supposed to go to with the Hollywood Foreign Press Association to talk about, the plan for the show. And he said, I figured at this point I was unfireable. And so he didn't go. But here's what it made me think about, and I'd love to talk to the panelists about this, is that one thing I've realized about myself recently is I don't really love constant celebrations of things that don't have any possible capacity for self-reflection. I feel that way in my own job. Like I don't particularly like meetings where we all just rah-rah about everything that we've done that's so great and we don't really talk about anything that went wrong. And I think, at this time of year, the Screen Actors Guild nominations just came out. I think yesterday, Directors Guild came out sometime this week. We've got Golden Globes. We're headed for the Oscars. There's lots of there's New York Critics Circle, but most of these things are just awards. And you get them and you get up there and you thank everybody until they play you off stage and that's it. And I was thinking, like, most of the time here, what we do is we often talk about movies that are really good, but there's something wrong with them, something that may be presented. I am going to say when we get to Decision whatever it's called, Decision to Leave, that I think that Hitchcock would have cut 20 or 30 minutes out of this movie and it would be a classic. People would go and watch it over and over again. But that's me. That's how I feel about it, But we often feel that way, that there's something better that could be done, so that you could take a movie and you could fix it up. And so I have this idea for the Wrongies, where we would have this award ceremony for movies that are basically good, but they made a really bad casting decision. There'd be a bad casting decision category. There'd be a director should have hired a screenwriter category. I'm looking at you, Ryan Johnson, and you, Todd Field, probably as well. That there's definitely going to be a too long category and stuff like that. So I threw this out to the panel. And, James, I didn't hear back from you on this, but I'm really interested to hear how you feel about this because you love movies so much. But I have to feel that the kind of almost blindly celebratory quality of most of these award ceremonies isn't really what you're in the game for.
Right. I think that they are, they're sort of becoming spectacles that are kind of divorced from movies generally, or sort of real movie life, if you like. I mean, the film industry is going in all kinds of directions now. And there are a lot of films being made by people who are not well known. They're coming from places where we haven't seen films before. And the whole sense of an awards thing. I mean, I think your description of the Golden Globes is a very good one. I mean, I enjoyed, like, for instance, Jennifer Coolidge was really great. She had the right attitude about it. It was sort of an unpretentious sort of, in a way, putting it in its place. And of course, that particular awards, but generally awards have all kinds of problems going on now that really highlight it being a kind of entertainment that exists on some distant planet from the movies that people are actually watching. And I mean, I love to go and watch movies in theaters, of course, and see them on a big screen. But the fact is that there are many, many movies coming out now that you can't always get to see them on the big screen because they go through so quickly. And so the whole award thing, I think the idea of a Wrongies is actually, that's kind of a great idea, because another aspect of filmmaking is that because of the inexpensive nature of digital filmmaking, there's an awful lot of dreck out there. And a lot of these people, they might have one bright idea, but then they make a film, 4 hours long or something and ruin it. They need somebody, some sort of mechanism really for getting people up to speed on what people will sit for and what you're talented with and what you're not talented with.
Right. I mean, and I feel like, let me just stay with you for a second, James. Like, you take a movie like Tar, which, I mean, Cate Blanchett is so dispositively going to win the Best Actor award and a lot of, or Best Actress, I guess it is, award. And, I mean, Michelle Yeoh's acceptance speech at the Golden Globes was basically, this is the only one I'm going to win. Blanchett's got the rest of them, so let me talk for a while. So it's got that, and it's got some other things going for it, and there are people who really love it, think it's the best movie of the year. I talked to a lot of people who really hate it. But I also sort of look, James, at the screenwriting credit. I go, oh, Todd, you wrote this in addition to directing it. Did it occur to you to have somebody come in and punch up the script a little bit, or maybe just ask you some questions, about motivation and character and stuff like that? And that's sort of what I think about with the Wrongies. It's kind of, I mean, I don't know who would go and accept these awards. Not the people who did these things. Probably some editor they didn't hire, would go up and get the award. But I just feel exactly what you're saying, James. I feel so close to loving so many movies.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I feel that way too. And I think that, like in the case of Tar, for example, it's almost like it's a purist vision that he had, and he wasn't going to listen to anybody beyond maybe Cate Blanchett herself, that maybe that they had some conversations. But you have this feeling that there's an impenetrable quality to actually making modifications. And I think this has shown up in so many ways with so many different kinds of film. You're talking about films that are too long, script writers who don't know how to tie the story together or who don't know how to conclude, films that end, 5 times. You're really getting to the end of it and thinking, please make this time be the one. And you get the feeling they haven't had that conversation. And I think Todd didn't have that conversation. And Tar, I love Tar actually, but it is a film that it could have been more spare in a way, but it also needed to have get in touch with her human quality, which I don't think it really did. Yeah,
I mean, I think there's sort of a joylessness that pervades it a lot of the time that I don't think is even really true to the spirit of orchestral music. But I get other people. I love like James, just several things James just said, like an impenetrable quality to making modifications or whatever that was. That should be a category in the Wrongies. but anyway, so Carolyn, obviously you would be the host of the Wrongies. You're so ready. You've been preparing your whole life to host the Wrongies. But so give us some of your thoughts about even maybe which awards you would really look forward to handing out.
Yeah, I would be perfect for this because I think most movies go wrong for me. In fact, it's like more of a celebration for me to find something that hasn't done me dirty, to be honest. I think for me, a big editing is just so key. Why are these movies like almost 3 hours long? Like, why is this a thing that we are suffering through and allowing and celebrating? I think that most movies need an editor who just comes in and is like, nope, we need to take out like an hour of this movie and then maybe it's watchable. So I definitely think that that would be a main category for me. Also, writing. When I was like thinking about this, and the interesting thing is I couldn't even like pinpoint a specific movie that does this, but it happens a lot. We all know it. I just couldn't come up with one off the top of my head, is where there's like a bad plot device in the middle of the movie that, they started writing one way and have to take a turn and need to move on because they're trying to be mindful about the fact that the movie's already 3 hours long.
Right. As you're speaking, I'm actually having a thought, which is that, there's several ways in which you know that the movie Mank, is that what it's called? Pants Mank? You know that it's a period piece. First of all, it's in black and white. But it's all about like getting somebody to write something. Like, God, are we going to get him out of his bed so he can write this movie? You could make that movie today. Nobody cares.
Right. So
like about Steven Spielberg dragging Tony Kushner. I mean, which he did and he should do. But like writing is such a deglamorized. It was always a deglamorized profession. But even the idea of Mank, which is that behind the scenes, Orson Welles really needs this guy. I feel like
I would equate it with the adaptation where we get to watch like Nicolas Cage as two twins trying to write a screenplay about a white oleander. Was a white orchid? I forget which
white
one.
orchid. Yeah, that was very complicated what you just did there, but we got it. We're with you. So yes,
very good, Helder.
I just Charlie Kaufman'd it. What do you want?
Yeah,
speaking of writers,
you Charlie Kaufman did. So Helder, how about you? You love movies too, but I'm guessing just watching person after person be celebrated is a little. Yeah, you go to movies to think about movies.
I mean, one of the top movies that comes to mind is one that I would have really loved and wanted to love, which was The Batman, which, I've been on this show plenty of times to talk about comic books and comic book movies. And it's just like, I was so looking forward to it. And it is like so overlong, so tediously long, so like pretentious in trying to make this like grand epic about the bat, and it just becomes this dragged down thing where I'm just like, we don't need to see Batman walk across the screen for 5 minutes to get to the bad guys to whoop their butts. It's like, why is this taking so long? Where is the editor in this? And I expect better from Matt Reeves, who's a great director and a great writer, and also could use another writer, because I'm like, what is going on half the time in this movie? And I actually like the movie, but I'm like in the same boat as James and Carolyn where it's just like, all right, we need to like streamline some of this. But then you get classic historic issues where you get The Magnificent Ambersons, which could have been a wonderfully beautiful epic for Wells that got taken away from him by the producers and got edited by some random editor who just said, just cut an hour out. And they're like, where? And he said, anywhere. Like, it doesn't matter. Just cut things down. And you get the mess that it turns into. So it's
right. And then, of course, today what would happen is Wells would be able to release the 5-hour version to Blu-ray or something.
Orson Welles' Magnificent Amberson, I would actually hashtag that for,
yes,
along
people,
with Zack Snyder.
Yes. So, James, another category that I would have in my Wrongies, which doesn't fit the rest of the categories, but it's just too great not to have it, is the anticipatory dread category, in which I would currently put Megalopolis, which I think didn't Coppola sell his vineyards or something so he could make this movie? And apparently, he fires the art department every couple of days. And Adam Driver had to write a little open letter to Deadline.com saying, "Oh no, it's not that bad." On the script. I mean, some movies you start to get excited about because it seems like they're already coming unglued while they're being made.
Well, I think there are so many examples of that. And I think part of it is driven by antsy investors who now are able to communicate and follow every minute detail of what's going on. And they can also pressure the studio or the producers. And you really have the influence of a lot of people who are not really aware of the film. They're not skilled. It's like the opposite of the problem with editing and writing. You've got a lot of people who are driven by other things than making a good story. And when you compare it with films, sort of that are tightly made by somebody who had a vision, somebody like Hitchcock, who did a storyboard with and knew exactly what shots he was going to do, and comes in, with 90 minutes or maybe 100-minute film that is very tight, and it's his vision, and he has made that, and he has been trusted to do that in a sense by the investors, the studio at that time. But now there are so many investors who are involved in the conversation who have no idea what's going on other than worrying about, will they get their money on Saturday morning after the Friday opening? And it leads to these impossible situations where you get publicists who are trying to steer the conversation, trying to steer the impression of the film. And the publicists don't even know. They've been hired, like on Monday to do something for Tuesday, and they don't even know what the film's about, but they're trying to create an impression about the film that might make more people interested in it.
Right. There's a huge controversy going on these days, too, about trailers and how misleading trailers can be. And people wanted to sue about a movie that was supposed to have Ana de Armas in it, and she got cut out of the movie.
Yes, actually, they didn't want to. They did.
Yeah.
They sued.
Oh, they did sue?
They did sue, yeah. That came out last week. I'm trying to remember the movie.
But yeah, so, we're going to have to wrap this up fairly soon. But Carolyn, when James talks, I always feel like, first of all, he's so smart about all this stuff, and he knows so much more about it than I do. But I often think, like, I was just thinking, maybe there's like no really good way to make a movie. Either it's in the hands of bean counting investor venture capitalist jerks, who are going to be looking at dailies, on their laptops and having all kinds of ideas about them. Or you've got Woody Allen, who spent his entire life making sure that can't happen to him. But now, like, nobody can send David Steinberg over there to say, you know what? Let's just punch this scene up a little bit. All right, let's find a beat here where there's a joke, that really kind of sells this scene. I feel like there's just no way to make a good movie.
Well, there are a lot of movies out there that argue that your point is correct, but there are enough really good ones that I think it's just the perfect storm. You have to have a good team. Like making a movie is a group project where everyone has to be, and all the stars have to align, where it can happen. But I just think, like, yes, odds are most of the time you're going to fail horribly and you're going to end up getting a wrongie.
Oh, well,
I've been on plenty of movies that deserve wrongies. Let me tell you that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So I just got a note from the producer of the show, who's also the technical producer of the show today, and it says "Crackers After Carolyn," which is actually that's the name of a screwball comedy from like '52, right? Rosalind Russell.
Yes.
I think it's Crackers After Carolyn. Yeah. So we're supposed to talk.
Crackers is also a John Waters character.
That's true. Well, also, there was just this great moment. We did a show a couple of days ago about late night comedy, and you'll love this, James. Amber Ruffin, who's this exciting new African-American comedic host, was interviewing John Oliver, and it was right after Christmas, and she was asking him about British Christmas. And he said a few things about it, very funny things about it. Then she said, and you also have the crackers. And he looked at her and he goes, that's a word we can use, but you can't say that, which I thought was terrific. Anyway, we're going to talk about a different kind of crackers, stone wheat thins. So stone wheat thins are going to be discontinued. But stone wheat thins, just to contextualize them, to remind you, they're like perfectly square, and they have a little bit of salt on them. And they don't have too much flavor, so you can put the brie on them, and they're not going to compete with the brie. And they've been just sort of this staple of, like, you're throwing some cheese out with some crackers. People are over. You didn't really work too hard on the hors d'oeuvres, but you're going to be okay if the cheese is okay. And they're just being discontinued. and I just I don't understand. Helder, this was a really good cracker. Why did it go away?
You're asking the guy that didn't actually read the article on this one, aren't you?
No, I'm just asking you to do that sort of like,
I'm going to
intuit why that.
Intuit. I think the stoned wheat thins. There's so many crackers out there now. Like, we're all white. Who cares? It's like all these plain crackers. The stoned wheat just feels like it sucks. It does suck because it's a great.
It's a great cracker. Let me just say also that the remaining stoned wheat thins. I almost don't need to tell anybody this. Are now for sale on eBay for $2,500 a box, according to the article that we read. And I really resonated to that because when my partner was in the hospital, we had to do this kind of big clean out of part of the house, and we put a couple of rugs outside while we were doing the clean out, and they got rained on, they got wrecked. And they turned out to be these Susan Sargent rugs, and they're pretty good rugs, and not only that, but Susan Sargent stopped making them. So I now, I had to get her a Susan Sargent rug for Christmas. Right? I had to find one. And if anybody's listening right now, if you have a Susan Sargent rug in your house, I will buy it right now, sight unseen. I'm working off my moral debt. So that's what happens when you take something away and you don't make them anymore. But Carolyn, you say that you feel like your whole life is marked by the discontinuation of foods that you may or may not have cared about.
Well, I mean, I'm still mourning the high C Ecto cooler that dropped off the market like 30 years ago. But so as far as stone wheat, whatever these crackers are, I actually hate them, and I am not sorry to see them go. They fall in that same category to me as that other cracker that always they just cut up the roof of your mouth. They're a very aggressive cracker. I understand that they are a good facilitator for cheeses because they're flavorless. But they just they're too hard and sharp. So I feel like we're going to be fine without them. We have better things that don't destroy.
Did you sue Nabisco about this or something? Is this why this is happening? Because your
What I want to know is why does it say imported on the box? Where is it imported from?
Right. That's the question.
All right. James, you have the floor now.
Well, I think that it's obviously a plot by a huge European conglomerate that wants to manipulate the American market, and it's all about shelf space. And probably they're going to introduce a new kind of cracker with 7 different variations so that they can push other products off the shelf. I mean, I feel indifferent about that particular cracker, but I do think that, people get attached to these things. So I understand how upset people get. But I mean, if I go to the supermarket and I can't get a particular thing, I say, okay, well, they probably moved on. And it then becomes the whole thing becomes about fantasies online and the apparent willingness of people to part with huge amounts of money for nothing.
One of the great reviews that's on Amazon right now is that it tasted like soap cleaner. So it's anonymous. I mean, Carolyn, was that you? Did you go and drop a review in the last few minutes to say it was?
No, I was legally advised not to do that.
Right. It would affect her lawsuit about her injured upper palate. So I'm also being told by the technical producer and the producer of this episode, who are the same person today, that we cannot go to our break without Carolyn talking about Pastina. I just want to say to James, we're all just living in internet fantasies right now. I mean, there's no possibility that everything that we do isn't either engaging in or responding to an internet fantasy. That ship is so sailed. But I get your point too. All right, so pastina. I don't even know what pastina is, and I cook a lot. What is it?
Okay, so pastina is that little tiny star pasta that really what are you going to use it for? I mean, it's adorable. It's like the twee pasta. It's these little stars. But anyway, I was at Big Y just this week, and I was in the pasta aisle, and some woman turns to me unsolicited and said, they're getting rid of pastina, so if you like it, you should buy it, which of course incited a panic in me and caused me to buy 2 boxes of pastina, which I don't even know. I've never in my life used pastina, but the thought of not being able to have it made me need to buy it because I was like, well, it's cute, little stars. I'm sure I'll find a recipe, and I could never have it again.
Well, that was my soup growing up, was pastina. My mom would always use pastina because of the little stars.
Yeah, I've since found out.
I'm coming to your house soon, Carolyn.
You can get $20 a box for them just on the basement. I hope you still have them.
Well,
Somebody
I
wants
do.
some upsell.
But then I found out from Jonathan in emailing today when talking about foods getting canceled. I mentioned pastina and my need to binge buy it because I thought it was going away. He corrected me. It is not. It's only one brand of pastina is being discontinued. Apparently, Barilla will be continuing to make pastina. So there is no pastina shortage or crisis. So no one needs to be eBaying pastina, despite whatever chaos that woman at Big Y was trying to cause.
Well, and I think I have to give the conch shell back to James now, because I do feel like that the shot in this movie where the woman turns to Carolyn in the aisle at Big Y and says, "You won't be able to get these anymore," and then Carolyn buys 2 boxes of something she doesn't even want. That's the James Hanley. Isn't that the James Hanley critique of capitalism? In a 90-second scene.
Exactly. I think this is a great scene, Carolyn. I think this is perfect for you, and I think that I can just see the script now, but I don't think it's going to make it to 90 minutes. I think we're probably talking about maybe a 15-minute short, but it'll be a hit, believe me.
It's called Crackers Before Carolyn.
Right.
There you are. Perfect.
No. Well,
okay.
yeah. No, that was the original working title, and then some people from Warner got on the phone and said, "No, it's going to be called White Noise too."
Can I co-produce?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Carolyn is going back to the supermarket, and this time Adam Driver's not there. All right, we're going to take a little break. We'll come back. We're going to talk about a very, very interesting movie, Decision to Leave.
Sorry I said the things I did. It was a silly fight. I was wrong, you were right. What I really mean to say is, you can eat crackers in my bed anytime, baby. You can kick off all the covers in the middle of the night.
All right, we're back. I'm back with James Hanley, Hilda Mira, and Carolyn Paine. Decision to Leave is the 11th feature by the director Park Chan-wook. It's written by Park and Jang Shao-kyung. See? Park, you got a screenwriter. You got someone to come in and work on this. And we should say that Park is probably best known for movies like The Handmaiden and Old Boy. And I'm sure Helder and James have seen all, 10 of the preceding movies. But Carolyn and I haven't. So this is a romantic thriller. It is unabashedly, or maybe abashedly, in the vein of Hitchcock. I would say that at minimum, we're seeing a Vertigo, Rear Window, and Marnie, at minimum, plus some elements of movies like Sea of Love and Basic Instinct and the Insomnia movies. And they're all in there somehow, but this manages, I think, to be different and original. So let's get going. Let's get talking about it. James, you should probably get us going on this movie. Tell us a little bit about what you're seeing up on the screen.
Well, I was probably, I think, most excited by its visual style. It really swept me up and kept me going. I do agree a little bit about the length of it. It could have been a bit shorter, but the actual nature of the film, it has such an air of confidence about telling the story. It's a story of great complexity that I couldn't tease out all the details, but it's extraordinary in its transitions from one part of the story to another that actually seems to take the inner voice of a character and suddenly make that a scene. And then visually, the sense of using the camera, the widescreen camera in this particular case, in a very assured way, with deep focus and then flat focus, and then the next minute the angle changes in a very inventive way. It just it has a sort of virtuosic quality that instantly got my attention, and I felt really drawn into it. And you can see elements of other filmmakers, but this is a really talented filmmaker, I think, who actually has the talent to carry the structure of a film. I think obviously there were other people who worked on the film, but this has a really sort of individual stamp about the way the story is told and the visual quality of it. And I would say that the only thing would be this issue of length again, that there needs to be somebody who actually sits in a theater and with the director and watches the film and actually maybe talks about actually creating the atmosphere in a spare manner that doesn't make you feel, okay, it's been 2 hours now, we need to end this kind of thing, which is unfortunate because this is a brilliant film, I think.
They should just have like a hologram of Jack Warner or something, like put it in there, sit next to the director. All right, you got to fix that. Yeah, James, while you have the floor too, I just wanted to see, I'm really stunted, I think, when it comes to really I know this is a great looking movie. I wouldn't be able to explain why as articulately and expertly as you just did. But I had one thought afterwards, and I wondered whether I was even right about it. But we should say that the movie is about this kind of repressed cop with insomnia. He's got a marriage that's, has no real spark going on in it. And then very much in the vein of a lot of other movies, he's investigating a death, and the wife of the dead guy is either a person of interest or not, but he winds up in that kind of dance that we've seen before with this woman. Is she a victim? Is she bereaved? Is she dangerous? Is she the doer, as they would say in Sea of Love? And one thing I thought, James, was that this actress, Tong Wei, is amazing. And she's amazing because you can't figure her out, and you really, really want to. And correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like there aren't a lot of close-ups of her. I feel like she's usually shot in these kind of medium field shots, where at minimum, like her upper torso would be, fully in the frame. And so I found myself kind of leaning forward, saying, I want to see more of her face. And I think he intentionally won't let us do that.
Exactly. I think that she's made kind of mysterious, but she breaks through that because she has such charisma. But the actual visual noting of her, her scenes are sort of truncated or angular. And there's another thing too, that there's a curious thing going on with language, that she is supposedly from China, and she doesn't feel confident when she's describing precisely what she wants to say in Korean, and so she uses a phone translation to play that translation, and it provides it sort of makes once removed from her and increases the mystery about her. But she has this extraordinary charisma that breaks through all of it. And she's just an amazing find. And I happened to be watching the new series on Netflix at the same time of Elena Ferrante's story, The Lying Lives of Adults. And the main character in that sort of has that same quality. She's like, you're totally drawn in, and you're wondering, what makes her tick? What is she doing? And you really care about it, and it makes it a fascinating journey to follow. And in Decision to Leave, she really is, she's like a vortex in the film that by the end of it, she's really drawn everything to her.
She makes Kim Novak look like a relatively solvable puzzle. So Carolyn, James touched upon one thing I wanted to talk about, which is, it really is such an updated romantic thriller in the role that technology plays. It's not billet doux being written on pieces of parchment. But it's like, yes, that whole translation device where she speaks Chinese into her phone and then holds up the phone. Sometimes there's a male voice saying the Korean translation, but there's also these Dick Tracy watches where they're like recording conversations and translating those conversations sometimes, and a lot of texting, which goes on in all movies these days, it seems. But I really felt like, this is Hitchcock, but, post Steve Jobs.
Yeah, I mean, so this movie, I had a lot of concerns about watching this movie. I didn't get a chance. I wasn't going to get to it till very late last night. I will admit, I started it last night late and fell asleep. But then this morning, when I sat down to watch it, I was fully engaged in it. It's interesting watching something where you have to rely. I'm somebody who watches like everything with subtitles on. I especially like horror movies, I feel, and movies like this that tend to be quiet. Like even if it was in English, I'd want subtitles. But it's interesting. I hadn't watched a movie that I needed to use the subtitles to, be following the plot in a long time, or anything like that. And it engages you in a whole different way. You have to be very committed to watching it. Like if you glance down at your phone, you've lost track of what's happening. And then you look back up and they're like talking into a Dick Tracy watch. And you're like, wait, are we in the future? I don't know what's happening. So I found that I had to focus on this in a whole different way that normally I do not actually focus on things. And I was really captivated by this movie visually and by the performances and the actors. And Helder had told me that it had this very like Hitchcock vibe, and that kind of like soothed me into watching it. And I was like, all right, this won't be so bad. But it really was kind of this like Hitchcock in the technical age. And I mean, visually, there are so many moments. I never say this about a movie, but I actually wonder if watching it again, if there are all these little like clues or little pieces left along the way that I would find. Because I feel like this kind of director and this cinematography is just so clever and is such a plot device in itself.
This is totally a rewatchable movie.
Yeah,
it's almost a mandatory rewatchable movie. And I mean, the other thing is, of course, you were watching it with your Jennifer Coolidge pink house coat with the marabou sleeves, and it's like in a whole different state of mind, I think, than you.
It is so scary how close to that you just.
Yeah, but I just want you to know, apropos of the movie, I'm not parked outside your house with binoculars right now. Okay.
Okay. Yikes.
That is not happening. That's not how I know something like that. So, Helder, since she mentioned that and she mentioned that you mentioned that, I do want to say, one thing that drives me crazy is, so he was interviewed about all this. Park was interviewed about all this. And he said, well, yeah, Hitchcock was really in a lot of ways one of the things that made me want to be a director. But I wasn't really thinking about Vertigo while I was making this. In fact, I didn't really think about it until there were some American reviews that mentioned it.
Oh, BS.
And I'm thinking, exactly, come on. You mean at the end of a 48-hour shoot when you're on top of some cliff with this dizzying shot and it's a cop who's up there who's not sure about the woman he's in love with? You never thought about Vertigo? Park, please.
Not even that scene. There's also the other scene that strikes me the most as Vertigo-esque is the scene where there's this great, beautiful scene where the two actually kind of go on this day date and are walking around, almost like the scene in Vertigo when Jimmy Stewart takes Kim Novak to the Redwood Forest, and they're kind of walking through and talking and having this kind of teasing conversation. And that scene just, to me, was evocative. The scene in Decision to Leave was evocative of that, of this like this cat and mouse type of game where they're trying to like. He's trying to get some information from her, but at the same time still flirting with her, and all that goes into that. So there's like so many little elements. I mean, obviously we mentioned Rear Window as well, and you just alluded to it by spying on Carolyn. That there's that whole beautiful sequence of him like following her, and like you see what he's seeing. But there's this great moment of like these moments where he like inserts the character into the scene. The cinematography is just absolutely wonderful. Like and keeping with that idea of like how they keep her distant from the viewer. There's these great scenes in the interrogation where you have him in foreground, both of them in foreground, but he's in focus, and then she's in focus, but only in the mirror. And they play with that quite a bit and very, very subtly, which again, one of the reasons why I'd love to go back and just examine the cinematography for that, especially for that last, I'm not going to blow the ending, but like the final scene is just gorgeously shot. And
right. It really makes you want to go to Korea too. I mean,
except for all that like overcast and
there's
fog.
That. Also, like if The Exorcist had been shot in Korea, nobody would be able to figure out where those stairs were that the director falls down and then that are key to the end of The Exorcist. Because there's like 6 places in every city apparently that look like where Jason Miller could have gotten killed. It's like, I don't know. Yeah, maybe it was here. Maybe it was down the street. It all kind of looks like this. So, James, I'm going to hand the conch shell back to you, and I think we're going to have to wrap this segment up pretty soon. So just talk about whatever you're thinking about right now.
Well, I was just thinking, talking about, his interview where he wasn't particularly, like acknowledging anything about Vertigo. I think that what you're dealing with here is somebody who is clearly a movie nut who watches lots of movies. And it's partly probably seeing Vertigo, but it's not specific. What it is seeing lots of stuff and being determined to watch as much as you can, and it permeates your sense of how you tell a story, I think, and how you have a visual sense, and I think that's something that it seems that this particular movie is a throwback to a kind of movie that is a personal work of somebody who worked with a good team of writers and actors, and who had a vision for the movie that was based on an experience of great length of watching many, many movies, and had developed the skill with the language, if you like, the visual language and the storytelling language. And so comes to a point where they can make a very special type of film. It's not a film made by a committee. It's not driven by investors. It's not something coming from a tent pole from a big studio. This is something that is a throwback in a way to the kind of vision that Hitchcock had, with all of its quirks and creepy parts too.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to sort of bring up one last thing, and Carolyn, I think you and I are the perfect people to talk about this, because there's a lot of the things about this movie that James and Helder, I think, love and justifiably love, are also a little bit. I don't know about you, but I was occasionally, there's sort of moments where there's a scene shift or a time shift that's completely unannounced, it's just kind of done through a jump cut, or there's also this device where somebody kind of is put into a room that he wasn't really in on a kind of fantasy basis. What if I were sitting right next to her watching all of that happen? But you're just sort of expected to figure out what's going on. And a couple of times I would be, are we in Ebo now? Where are we? And was he really in that room, or is this kind of a fantasy dream kind of thing? And I don't know. I'm getting, maybe it's the age I'm at right now. I just want like big letters on the screen saying this was 3 weeks ago and it's in a different city now.
Well, I told you I had to really focus on this movie because, if I glanced away for a second, I was lost. And it's 3 hours long. You don't want to have to be rewinding and adding time onto this. But I think once I got used to like what was happening, like those earlier scenes where there was a character in a room who wasn't there. That's why I said this is oddly a movie that I kind of think you need to see a second time to really put together a lot of the stuff that's there and digest it. Because like you have to, there's sort of a learning curve with this movie. I agree with that. You're the director is sort of ahead of you, and you're trying to, and the writing, you are sort of running to catch up with what techniques are being used and how they're telling this story.
All right, we have to stop there. By the way, the movie is 2 hours and 20 minutes. Don't be too scared away.
Okay, all right. So a slight exaggeration. Right. It took 3 hours for me.
Give it a chance. It really is such a visually rich movie, and it really does have a lot of the things that we do love about Hitchcock. So it's Decision to Leave. You can rent it for $3.99 from Amazon Prime. At least I could. All right, time to say thank you. As I say, it can be brief because the technical producer today is also the producer. Jonathan McPants is in the booth after having produced the entire episode. Also, I'd just like to say Kevin Costner couldn't be with us today because he didn't feel like coming. That's a Golden Globes joke.
Awesome.
Like Regina Hall had to get up and say, like Kevin Costner, he could have ridden one of the horses from Yellowstone to this ceremony. It's just like,
how did he win? That's what I wanted.
I'm good. I'm fine. All right. So time to make some recommendations. And Helder, since I just heard your voice, you can get us started here.
So in lieu of watching Yellowstone with Kevin Costner, I would like to push for and recommend one of the other people that was nominated, which was Diego Luna in Andor.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was a fantastic Star Wars, going back to Rian Johnson being referenced earlier, and really good writing, and also like overly long, but it's worth it. So Andor on Disney Plus, and the other show I wanted to push was thanks to you guys, I got introduced to Slow Horses. Season 2 just wrapped on Apple TV, and just as good as the first season, still continuing to build a lot of tension and in the spy world post Cold War, and a lot of fun for that. So.
Yeah, Andor kind of went cliffhanger at the end of its season 2. Although that's like the worst cliffhanger I've ever seen. Anybody who thinks that one of them is going to shoot the other one is completely wrong. All right, so
spoiler alert.
Well, I didn't say who. All right, so Carolyn, why don't you go next?
All right. I recently watched in one sitting the show Inside Man on Netflix.
Oh, yeah.
It's Stanley Tucci and David Tennant and that actress, I think her name is Dolly Wells.
Yes.
The British actress and writer. This show is pretty spectacular. It is like a high octane Law and Order kind of vibe. It's really well written. Obviously, like Stanley Tucci just delivers. David Tennant. I don't even want to kind of go into what it's about. It's just really worth watching if you're looking for a good crime, mystery, thriller kind of thing. The last episode will really just like leave you like you're just like shaking the whole time with the anxiety of it. But it's good. It's a really good binge watch. Highly recommend.
I can sort of co-endorse that. And okay, I'm pulling up the wrong thing. Okay, I'm mad at myself because I can't think of the name of the guy, and I actually shouted him out on this show a little while ago. But there's this rather large African-American man who's
Atkins Esteban.
There he is. He, you don't steal a lot of scenes from Stanley Tucci,
No.
particularly when Stanley Tucci has already been handed a scenery-chewing part to begin with. But that guy, like a lot of times you just waiting for Stanley to shut up so that guy can say something funny.
So he was in that show. It was set in P-Town, Hightown.
Mm-hmm.
It was a show it was another crime show. I think it was on HBO like a couple years ago. And he was the scene stealer in that show as well. And I recognized him immediately in this. He is truly brilliant. Hightown is a great show too.
He's my favorite thing on Inside Man. All right, James Hanley, you are going to help wrap things up here.
Okay, just another quick mention of Elena Ferrante's story, Lying Adults, on Netflix. That's a really amazing. I think it's 6 parts. But also a book I just picked up that I think has been out for about a year by a writer named Amitav Ghosh, that's Ghosh, called The Nutmeg's Curse, which is a fascinating history of the world, really, how we're at the place we are with the planet, and the whole nature of what happened with colonialism and theft and conquest, and the nutmeg is a significant part of it. And of course, the nutmeg is a theme in Connecticut for different reasons. The Amitav Ghosh, The Nutmeg's Curse. And then lastly, I wanted to give a recommendation for Aurora's Cafe on Capitol Avenue. For $3.99, I think it is, which is a great place to go for breakfast or lunch, and the food is great.
All right, that's all just terrific, and thank you very much. I have less to I feel like I've had a very stressful week where I haven't been doing things that have led to some recommendations. But I did find one thing that I really liked a lot, and it's a little bit dated, but not too much. It's a podcast. It's called American Radical, and what it deals with is the radicalization of one of the people who was at the Capitol on January 6th. And it's you find this out right at the beginning. It's a woman who died whose name you probably don't know. I didn't know her name, know anything about her, and it's told very much through the lens of her family, who are trying to figure out what happened, and in particular why her personality changed really, really dramatically in the time leading up to this. She was not going into this the kind of person you would expect to be a demonstrator at something like that, not even particularly political, certainly not particularly conservative. And so what it does really well, first of all, I think it's good storytelling. The ending isn't maybe as dispositive as I would have liked it to be, but it really does tell the story about kind of how something like this happens. And it's full of details. Like I feel pretty immersed in and imbued in this whole world of QAnon stuff and just the insane belief systems that get out there. But like I wasn't really aware that there's this whole school of thought that this particularly expensive, I don't know why I'm laughing, this expensive brand of Wayfair, a sub-brand of Wayfair furniture that has a person's name, people's names to it, that it contains like parts of sex trafficked children or something. They actually believe stuff like that. The Wayfair furniture is selling, furniture that has like little pieces of human beings in it or something. It just, the stuff that's in there that I hadn't known didn't make me happy to know, but it was really pretty fascinating and helpful in understanding some of this stuff. So we're going to, first of all, thank this panel, thank Mr. McPants, and close with Jeff Beck. We lost Jeff Beck this week at the age of, I think, 78, the great guitarist. We'll say goodbye to the nose right now.